Electric trucks are here, and so is yet another entry in our series where we check in on the industry and ask how electrification is going so far. We've been asking OEMs and other companies throughout the trucking industry how their customers have responded to electric trucks. The good and the bad, the questions and the answers. For this episode, I caught up with Kenworth's Sarah Abernethy and asked her these questions. Here's what she had to say. Well, I'm here today with Sarah Abernethy from Kenworth, and we're going to talk electric trucks. Sarah, how are you?
I'm excellent. How are you today?
Great. I would love to say excellent too. We're talking, obviously electric trucks have been ramping up for the past few years, and we're sort of taking the temperature of the industry on our show here and trying to figure out how it's going so far. A lot of these trucks have been out with fleets now, and OEMs are getting feedback, you're hearing what they have to say and making adjustments, and so we just want to see how all that's going. So I guess to start out, what sort of feedback have you been hearing?
Excellent. And we've been hearing a lot of feedback. For reference, we have two main models that we have out in the field today, and that's our K-Series medium-duty box truck and our T680E battery electric Class 8 tractor. Both of those trucks have been out for a few years now, like you said, kind of on pace with the industry. And the feedback so far has been very positive when we get them out there. And what I mean by that is it's a long road to get one of these trucks deployed, and making sure that we have the right setup from the get-go is how we ensure that these trucks are successful and that we then receive, hopefully, positive feedback once they do hit the ground. There's so much that goes into the way that these trucks will operate. It's not just that you can drive them around and go fill them up like you would your diesel. You have to have a strategy for what the route will be that the truck is going to be utilizing and running each day. And you have to have a infrastructure plan to go along with that to support it. And that's a big part of what we do to bring the trucks to market. And so for all the customers that we've helped get their trucks off the ground and get them running, we start out with a full route analysis, help them with their infrastructure plan, and ensure that the customer's supported from the first step all the way through to when the truck is deployed. And that's a key part of ensuring that success and some of that positive feedback that we can get more into shortly.
It's a lot, especially first starting out as a fleet, it's a lot more complicated than, you just buy a diesel truck, you get the keys, you take it out on the road.
Exactly.
So when you're working with fleets that are starting out, what are some of the frequent questions they have about electric trucks?
That is an excellent question, and there are so many questions we can pick from as far as what they should be asking and what we should be asking them. I think the main question that we start out with is, how much will they cost? And that's a controversial question. The price of battery electric trucks is no secret. It's certainly higher than our diesels. But by that same token, there is a lot of incentives, a lot of grants available out there for folks to take advantage of. So we can answer that question in a lot of areas depending on how they're going to use the truck by saying it's a lot, but we have a specialist that can help to put that truck in service and do so with the right grants and incentives to help ensure that we're getting the best return on our investment as we can. So the cost, of course, is one question. And similarly, the cost of that infrastructure to support the truck is another common question. How do I get a charger? How do I work with my utility? And that's where we call upon some of our sister divisions. We do have our financing arm, and we also have our PACCAR parts division that we utilize to help make sure we're putting a charger in place with the truck once it's deployed. And that can be anywhere from a 6 to 18 to 2-year lead time. It can be quite a while to ensure you have that infrastructure in place. So talking about timeline, when do you want to deploy this truck, is a question that we'll ask the customer. It's not necessarily what they might be asking us is, how long do I have to wait to get one? It's, well, let's talk about what the plan is to get there. So I'd say timeline is a big question. Cost, of course, is a big question. But by and large, how will this truck fit into my fleet? That's the biggest question, right? Can it do the job I need it to do? And from that perspective, that's where our team is largely looking at, tell me your route. We'll ask those questions back to the customer. Tell me your route. What payload are you looking to deploy with this truck? What is your opportunity for charging along the way? Tell us about your grades. What's the terrain look like? There's so much that goes into understanding if we can put One of our trucks, our T680E, for example, has a range of 150 miles. Making sure that we're working well within the bounds of that for a customer's route is a big piece of the discussion as well. So I think those are the three big ones, use, general applicability for that general duty cycle, cost, and infrastructure timeline.
Yeah, I think with the cost that you mentioned, in some ways it's new because, obviously it's electric trucks, they're new to the industry. But, fleets have had that kind of debate about costs forever when it comes to equipment and whether the upfront cost is worth the ROI you'll get back later. And so in a lot of ways, this isn't too dissimilar to, other equipment you might want to invest in that will help you out in the long run.
Exactly. And there's a lot that goes into, that equipment decision. It's not just the cost for an operator, right? They might have ESG goals or general, needs from their own customers too. Let's say that they are operating a fleet and their customers are now requesting that they use green transportation. So that's a big piece of it as well and can often drive customers to purchase these trucks.
Yeah, is that a significant portion of the fleets that you've been working with? Is that something that
we've seen it more and more, I'll say. I didn't truly think about that when we were looking at deploying BEVs originally, thinking of it. It's easy to get caught up in the regulatory discussion. And I think in a lot of ways, yes, that's a big piece of it, but there are truly customers out there and companies who have very, very, their ethos is founded on being sustainable. And this is a big piece of that. How do they move their goods around? So in that sense, certainly there is a driver in the market to ensure that we're meeting those goals for those customers and the customers that they serve.
So I want to ask next, going back to, the feedback, these have been out for a little while. How is the reaction from fleets compared to what you guys were anticipating?
Very, very good question. I love that perspective on it. What were we expecting versus what are we hearing? I think that when we talked about BEVs and when we were thinking through what the design requirements and the customer needs are ultimately, right? That's what drives our design requirements. The truck, from a driver's perspective, has been very, very favorable. I think we underestimated how much drivers would appreciate having a quiet, comfortable, just smooth place to work every day, right? If you think about what a diesel operator goes through day in and day out, right? You might smell of diesel fuel, you have to have your gloves, you have to do a little bit more throughout the day to ensure that everything's fueled up and ready to go. And all of the plug and go and the fueling side of things for the battery electric operators is much more clean and tidy. And that goes along too with the way that the truck operates. So it's much quieter, you are a lot smoother in your takeoff and delivery, and all told, you're working a little bit less, which is really, really neat for drivers to have as an option in a space where traditionally it was just diesel and it was just going to be, DEF and diesel fuel. And now we have an alternative where their day is going to be more comfortable. So from the customer perspective and truly from the driver, who is our end user, right? From the driver's perspective, that feedback I think was far more positive than we could have hoped.
And you can definitely see why that is. You get into the cab of one of those and that's the first thing you notice is that quietness. And
yes.
You can imagine how that adds up over, 6, 8, 10-hour day in one of those cabs.
Exactly. And even just participating in ride and drive events and hosting customers at our various facilities and events, even in my own very limited experience, and I am far from the customer, but sitting with customers in the trucks throughout the day, a day spent in a diesel is just much more tiring than a day spent in a battery electric truck. And customers have expressed that same sentiment, and we're really excited about that going forward for the product.
So as you continue to get feedback from fleets and they continue to run routes with these trucks, how do you see things, improving and changing over the next few years when it comes to electric trucks?
The thing that I am most excited about with regard to battery electric products is that customers want to be able to use these trucks more and more and more, and they want to be able to use them on longer and longer routes. So that brings up range, which I know we haven't talked on just yet, but range is a big part of the use case question that we talked about to begin with the discussion with. Can I use this truck to do all the routes that I need to do? And truly, in many cases, the answer is no today with battery electric technology. And that's not just ours, but prevailing sentiment in the industry, right? You can only really get 1 to 200 miles today. And so the most exciting thing for customers is that we're going to be able to accommodate more routes, and we're going to be able to accommodate more duty cycles, more operations, and ultimately cover more of what they need done with battery electric trucks as the technology develops in the next few years. So I'd say by and large, the comfort level we have down. Battery electric trucks are comfortable for drivers, they're exciting to drive. But now we just need to be able to get them to go farther. And that's where we're going to be heading in the next few years.
Yeah, that's definitely a big part of it. When you were talking earlier about, the kinds of questions that you need to ask fleets, that range one can just eliminate the possibility right off the bat. So the more that increases, the better for people who want options.
Exactly.
So I think that's about all I had to ask, but was there anything else you wanted to share from, your experience with electric trucks or anything, related to them?
I think the final note that I would want to share is just some of the anecdotes that we have seen in the marketing team from our ride and drive events that we host customers and folks maybe who aren't immediately in the market, but maybe they have an open mind and they want to experience the battery electric truck, or they might want to experience a zero emissions vehicle and just understand why it's different from diesels. And I would say that some of the most meaningful moments that I've had in this job is when somebody who gets in the truck and is a complete skeptic, they're like, I don't know if this is going to be for me. And instead, they put their foot down on the gas pedal, and I shouldn't say gas pedal, on the accelerator, and the truck just goes and it glides and it's quiet, and they have a smile on their face driving that truck. And that's not just one instance that's occurred. It's happened with multiple customers, multiple buyers and owner operators that we've had in these trucks. And I think that speaks volumes to the product and to the technology. So I'd be really excited to hear and hopefully see more of those smiling faces driving these trucks at events and out on the road in the industry. So I think that's the last piece that I would want to leave this discussion with, is that they're just fun trucks to drive. And I think that at the end of the day, drivers are drivers, and they're going to want to drive what's fun and what's cool. And at some point in the future, I think battery electric trucks will be cool and will be fun for them to drive, regardless of their background.
Well, Sarah, thanks so much for coming on, talking electric trucks today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This was an excellent discussion, and I'm excited to see where battery electric trucks head in the future.